Welcome, everybody. I'm Reginald Brown, local New York chairperson and a member of People's Action. This is Housing, Not Handcuffs. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to be here tonight with Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal with the National Homelessness Law Center, Vocal, RAP, and all of you to find out what we can do right now to fight for homes with dignity. We've got great speakers from all over the country. But first, let me introduce Sulma Arias, Executive Director of People's Action and People's Action Institute.
Hi, I'm Sulma Arias, Executive Director of People's Action Institute. And I want to thank all of you and our friends from the National Homelessness Law Center, Vocal, Voices of Community Activists and Leaders, and RAP, the Western Resources Advocacy Project, for joining us tonight. What does it mean to have a home? Think about it for a minute. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever lost that feeling? Do you feel that you and your loved ones are safe and have hope for the future? These are the things every one of us wants and deserves. But right now, it's something that not all of us in this country have. President Trump and his billionaire friends think only they have the right to feel safe with a roof over their heads. That's why we need to fight back against their tax cuts. They want to take money away from housing to give more money to billionaires who do not need it. That's why we need to fight for real solutions to our housing crisis. In the richest country in the world, no one should ever have to sleep in the streets. So thank you, Representative Jayapal, for advocating for everyone to have a home and for the Housing Not Handcuffs Act to be restored so that our rights can be restored. Having no place to go is not a crime. We know we can count on you and your progressive colleagues to advance real solutions to our housing crisis in Congress. So what solves homelessness? Homes for everyone, for every one of us. It's really that simple. That's why we need laws to give us housing, not handcuffs. So we're here tonight to find out what we can do to fight and to win. So thank you for being here and for joining this fight.
And now, let me welcome Jesse Rabinowitz from the National Homeless Law Center to kick things off. Take it away, Jesse.
Thank you, Reginald. We're here tonight because the rent is too damn high, and we know that when rents go up, so does homelessness. As we speak, more people are experiencing homelessness than ever before, and 1 in 4 people fear they will become homeless themselves. Meanwhile, politicians keep cutting funding for housing and essential services and are making it a crime to sleep outside, even when there is nowhere else to go. That's not right. To tell you how we got here and what we can do is my friend and colleague, Antonia Fasanelli. Welcome, Antonia.
Thank you, Jesse. Like you said, more of us are homeless than ever before in the United States, or we fear losing our homes. But how did we get here? So many of us are homeless because there is not enough housing that we can afford. Half of renters struggle to pay rent, and roughly a quarter of people in housing fear becoming homeless. Over 21 million renters pay more than they can afford in rent. The rent is too high. Homelessness in America is deeply racialized. It impacts Black people and people of color, as well as LGBTQ people and people with disabilities the most. Over 770,000 people are sleeping in shelters, streets, or cars. That's the highest number of unhoused people ever in this country, more than in the Great Depression. And that number doesn't include all those sleeping with friends and family, like 1 in every 30 children. Now, you might think, why doesn't someone solve this? Well, instead of advancing proven solutions to homelessness, like affordable housing and services, politicians and billionaires attack unhoused people all across the country, as well as people with mental health and substance use disabilities. Let me tell you how out of touch these billionaires are. They actually think that people choose to live outside. But what we know is that people can't afford the rent. So instead of making housing affordable, these billionaires push laws that will put people in jail instead of in housing. And here's how they're doing it. For decades, politicians on both sides of the aisle have been gutting housing and pushing to punish unhoused people, relying on lies. Homelessness is a choice. They do this in the name of public safety, but they are making all of us unsafe. We know that the safest communities are those that have the most resources, not the most police. So it is within this context that 1 year ago, our Supreme Court, with a conservative majority handpicked by Donald Trump himself, made matters much worse. Their decision in the case Gloria Johnson versus Grants Pass made it much easier for cities to ignore the need for housing and instead arrest and ticket people for sleeping outside even when they have nowhere else to go. And in the last year since that decision, more than 320 laws have been introduced in cities and state legislatures across the country to arrest, evict, and fine unhoused people without ever offering a solution.
That's shameful, Antonia. Everybody needs a home. So what can we do about it?
Well, Jesse, all across the country, communities are fighting back. And in Congress, our allies are introducing legislation to restore protections the Supreme Court took away. But we can't deny the truth that in many parts of the country, it's now much harder to be homeless at a time when our housing crisis needs more solutions, not less.
That's right, Antonia, and thank you. We'll hear more about how we can fight back in just a minute. But first, let's welcome Representative Pramila Jayapal from Washington State to tell us about this exciting new national legislation. Welcome, Representative Jayapal.
I'm Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and I'm honored to represent Washington's 7th Congressional District in the House of Representatives. Thank you so much to the National Homelessness Law Center and People's Action for the opportunity to share a few words with you today. Next week will mark 1 year since the Supreme Court's Grants Pass decision, which paved the way for cities to jail or ticket individuals who have no choice but to sleep outside. And just a few days before that anniversary, along with Congressman Maxwell Frost, I will be introducing legislation to prohibit the criminalization of homelessness on public lands. And I'm looking forward to sharing more about that in the coming weeks. The Grants Pass decision was a disastrous ruling. It lets states and localities throw people in jail just for sleeping outside, even if they have nowhere else to go. It allows for the destruction of encampments, which means throwing out IDs and other documents that people need to live, find an apartment, or get a job. This is the definition of cruel and unusual punishment. Punishing unhoused people does nothing to reduce homelessness or address its root causes. In fact, it's been proven to be counterproductive and make homelessness even worse. Last year, homelessness increased by 18%, and it makes no sense to criminalize these people as the cost of housing continues to skyrocket. You literally can't afford a one-bedroom apartment on a minimum wage salary anywhere in this country. Now more than ever, we have to stand up and protect the rights of homeless individuals. My legislation would do just that, preventing federal agencies and contractors from imposing civil or criminal punishments on homeless persons while conducting what are called life-sustaining activities like eating or sleeping. Here's the thing. If we want fewer people sleeping outside, we should focus on and invest in real solutions to homelessness, like housing and support, not by passing backwards laws that make the issue even worse. When we throw people in jail and fine them thousands of dollars for not having a place to live, in what world does that make sense? Research has even shown that when people experiencing homelessness are forced to spend time in prison, they leave poorer due to lost belongings, and they're often in worse health. We have to do better than the 225 bills further targeting and criminalizing homelessness that have been introduced across the country since the Grants Pass decision, 160 of which have become law. Better than Trump and Republicans' budget, which will cut healthcare and food assistance while giving handouts to billionaires and giant corporations. Poverty is not a failing of individuals. It is a policy failure. It is a failure of politicians who put the interests of the rich over those of poor and working people. Arresting people who cannot afford to live will only push them further into poverty. There are real solutions to combat homelessness. Criminalization is not one of them. Cruelty will not solve the problem. So thank you all for the incredibly important work you do and for your partnership in this fight. And I look forward to officially introducing our legislation together next week.
Just as Representative Jayapal just said, this new national legislation, the Homeless Not Handcuffs Act, restores important protections for people who are homeless and will be introduced to Congress next week. What can you do? I'm so glad you asked. You can tell your representatives to support this bill. Follow the link on your screen to use our online ticket, and you can contact them right now. Later in the program, you'll find out more about what you can do right now to help. Now, Jesse, back to you to welcome our special guests.
Thank you, Reginald. Like you said, the Grants Pass decision affects us all. Tonight, we'll hear directly from people all across the country hurt by the Supreme Court's ruling and by the over 320 anti-homeless laws introduced across the country that stem from the court's shameful decision. First, let's hear from Helen Cruz, who was in Grants Pass, Oregon, and who joined us last year in front of the Supreme Court. Welcome.
Thank you, Jesse. My name's Helen, and I've lived in Grants Pass for nearly 40 years. I've been homeless off and on for most of those years. But in 2016 is when everything finally came to a head, and I was actually honored to be able to be in Washington, D.C. with the Housing Not Handcuffs rally, and I learned a lot. So, with that being said, living here in Grants Pass, Oregon, where it originated from, I have to say it's pretty much a nightmare. Anybody who's homeless in Grants Pass, they make it impossible to be here. Their main goal is for everybody here to not be here. If you're homeless, you're shunned, you're pushed out of town, and I just recently realized that being an advocate for the homeless out here, because I was with them myself, I don't forget where I came from, that there's much more that we can do when it comes to getting through the red tape and pushing forward to be able to make it to where everybody has a home. Being treated like we're less than or not human is it's pretty overwhelming, and at times it's heartbreaking, and right now the city council over here chose to close down one of the homeless encampments, and they did it in the middle of winter when there was no place for anybody else to go. um, since then they have put encampments downtown and basically put everybody on display who is homeless, and I don't know if they're just trying to dehumanize them or make them so shameful that they want to leave town. But nevertheless, I do believe that in a sense, that if we were all treated like humans, um, we would be able to, overcome the fact that people are so judgmental, for one. When it comes to legislation and what's being done as far as the political aspect of it, I go to city council all the time. I stand up for the homeless. And I'm hoping one day that maybe we can just figure out something and keep pushing forward to where there's going to be a difference that will be made. So if everybody just, just stands together, keeps legislation moving forward, keeps going to the House bills and making sure that people do their parts and get their ducks in a row, then I do believe that one day housing and homelessness won't be an issue. Thank you, Jesse. Back to you.
Thank you, Helen. The Grants Pass decision makes life harder for people all over the country and makes Donald Trump's dream of forcing homeless people into government-run detention camps even more likely. To get a sense of how the federal government is making homelessness worse, we will now hear from Hodge, right outside of Bend, Oregon. For 6 years, Mandy lived in the Deschutes National Forest in a trailer. Then 6 weeks ago, the Trump administration's federal agents showed up and forced her and about 200 others to leave, threatening them with jails and fines. This was the biggest homeless eviction in recent history. Welcome, Mandy.
Thank you, Jesse. I was born in Grants Pass, Oregon, the town where this all started. My life took me down many paths. I went from addiction to recovery. I went to moving to Bend here in '99. I was a dance instructor. I was a volunteer structure firefighter. My path that led me to homelessness came from fleeing a domestic violence relationship where even with an active no contact order, when I asked the police to help me, they said that they wouldn't because the case was out of a different county. So I became a camper. I became a camper in the Deschutes National Forest, which is located just south of Bend in Bend, Oregon. Sorry. In March, I became aware of the Forest Service's deceitful actions when an outreach provider filled me in and made me knowledgeable to what was going on about the way that they got the project approved. My involvement led to me speaking to journalists all across the country. I became a plaintiff on the suit that was filed to try and stop the closure. After all of that, the Forest Service officers, they became very aggressive with us. They were hostile. They were issuing citations to people that were later getting thrown out in court for no probable cause. One of them even told me that he suggested I be out of the closure area before the deadline because the closer it got to it, the worse it was going to get for me. Another time, a friend of ours caught one of the officers creeping into our camp to tape one of the closure notices to our vehicle. It's sad. When it comes down to the closure, it's one example. Forest Service officers were laughing at campers that were telling their story of hardships. It's awful. They told us that they were going to allow people to call for they gave us a phone number for people to call for 90 days to claim their belongings after they closed the China Hat or Deschutes National Forest area that we were kicked out of. And they're not even following that one bit. I think maybe 2-3 people have gotten phone calls back from them. And it's been 32 days since I called and I have not gotten a phone call back. It's sad. Some have been hospitalized trying to get back into the boundary lines, trying to get their belongings because they don't believe the Forest Service is going to call them. The best thing I could say for the Forest Service's actions or way of organization would be how they locked the gate. That was the only way they were organized. It's sad. The Forest Service is supposed to stand for more than that, and they are not living up to what we all expect from them. It's awful. But since then, I got to meet some great people and work with some extraordinarily smart people and caring people. And since the day of the closure, we've all got to talk with city councilors. We've got to talk with representatives from 2 U.S. senators' offices. We've talked to a tiny home cabin company that is hoping to work with us to help. And, the best I can say is that even though we can't redo the China Hat closure, we can learn from it to know now what not to do. And last thing I can say to you is that the handcuffs over housing is, it's not just a bad choice. It's cruel and unusual punishment. Thank you, Jesse. Back to you.
Thank you, Mandy. Let's be clear. Laws that make it a crime to be homeless make communities less safe and make it harder to solve homelessness. It's not a coincidence that these anti-homeless laws are popping up everywhere. They are all connected to the Cicero Institute, a billionaire-backed think tank with deep ties to the Trump administration. Starting in 2021, the Cicero Institute began peddling cookie-cutter bills that make it illegal to sleep outside and cut funding for housing that solves homelessness. The Cicero Institute also asked the Supreme Court to hear the Grants Pass case. You see, it's all connected. And we know that their laws are expensive and make homelessness worse, but these laws also kill. Just this week, we learned that a man in Florida froze to death after his tent was destroyed following an encampment eviction spurred by the Cicero bill. That ain't right. And that's why we went to the Cicero headquarters in Austin, Texas to tell them so. The man behind Cicero's evil, backwards laws, is a venture capitalist billionaire named Joe Lonsdale. Joe made his billions at Palantir, a tech company the US government uses to deport people. It's shameful that anybody should think that these billionaires know anything about solving homelessness. It's clear that the same billionaires who want to throw homeless people in jail want to cut budgets for housing, food, and healthcare. Personally, I think everybody should get housing and healthcare first before these billionaires get another mega yacht or a private jet. Sorry, Reginald. I get a little heated when I talk about these billionaire bros spreading lies about homeless people so that they can line their pockets. I'll pass the mic back over to you.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. I'm feeling it right now in my chest, Mandy's story. Now, I'd like to welcome Pony Morris, my colleague from Vocal, Texas, Kentucky, to tell us how the Cicero-sponsored reality is affecting their community. Welcome, Pony.
Yeah, thank you, Reginald. So good evening. My name is Pony. I'm an organizer with Vocal Kentucky. I want to start by saying this is what housing looks like. Before I got here, let me run this by you. When you start feeling like nothing or less than by living under a bridge on a sidewalk, I was a part of a community, but not the real world type. My community was people that lived in tents alongside me under the bridge. I want to ask you, what is the only thing as a child that you know of that lived under a bridge? Where it takes me back to is the story of Billy Goat's Gruff, and that's a troll. I want to ask you, are we human or are we trolls? In 2024, they passed a bill called the Safer Kentucky Act, but we call it the Suffer Kentucky Act. What the state has started to do is criminalize the unhoused and the poor. How can we criminalize poor people? If you really look at this, this is cruel and unusual punishment. How can you criminalize somebody for not living in a house or an apartment? So to think about this, when you have a housing outreach for the city that comes by and they're dressed like police, you got to remember we are already in fear of the police because the only thing the police have ever done is thrown our things away or displaced us or told us you don't belong here. I want to ask, where do we belong? Do we belong anywhere? When you guys come every morning dressed as police officers, here's the things that we think. Is he coming to throw our things away? Or is he coming to cite me because I don't live in a house? Or is he coming to take me to jail? What everyone doesn't get is if they take me to jail or they take me to rehab for being homeless and I get out, I'm still homeless. So what am I going to be able to do if everybody around me gives up on me? If everybody around me throws my things away? If everybody stops caring? At the end of the day, We need housing now.
Wow. Thank you, Tony. It's always good to be with you. To tell us more about how Cicero bills make life harder for all of us is Lindsay Creeks from Open Table in Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Reginald. For nearly 2 decades, I've been working on the streets of Nashville, helping my unhoused friends connect with housing and organizing with them for their rights. Throughout these years, I've never seen anything like what we've experienced since the Cicero Institute, an anti-homeless think tank, came to our state in 2021. That spring, our team heard about a bill that would make it a felony to camp or sleep on any public land across Tennessee. We signed up to testify against it, but Cicero's top policy advisor, who doesn't even live in Tennessee, testified for it. Despite his testimony, we defeated it in committee. But the next year, legislators brought it back, and with the help of Cicero's lobbyists and money, they pushed it through. Our state now has the harshest penalty for sleeping and camping in the nation, a Class E felony, punishable by up to 6 years in prison, a $3,000 fine, and the loss of voting rights. Every day, our friends on the streets are harassed for simply existing. Every day, they're cited, fined, and arrested, not because they're causing harm, but because our shelters are full and our elected officials have decided to fund cops, courts, and cages instead of housing and care. So what does this mean for service providers like us? Instead of spending time helping our friends move into permanent housing, we're tied up in the carceral system. We've spent countless hours accompanying people to court, advocating for reduced charges, expunging records, appealing housing denials, and defending homeless camps that are threatened with closure when no adequate alternatives are given. Instead of working on proactive policies that move us toward ending homelessness, we're having to spend the majority of our time on the defensive. The Supreme Court's decision to overturn the Grants Pass case has only emboldened public officials and law enforcement across Tennessee, and they carry out cruel policies and encampment clearings that further entrench our people in cycles of homelessness. Last fall, for instance, police officers in downtown Nashville arrested over a dozen people under a felony camping law over the course of 3 weeks. One of those people was a 55-year-old Nashvilleian confined to a wheelchair with frostbite injuries. Laws like this threaten our neighbors experiencing homelessness by reducing their chances of finding housing and employment and instilling fear and distrust in the system and in providers like us. That's just what Pony was speaking to. Instead of ending homelessness, these laws make it worse. We weren't organized at the state level when Cicero came for us in 2021, but we are now. In 2023, we defeated a Cicero bill, and earlier this year, we launched Housing for All Tennessee, a statewide coalition on homelessness, tenants' rights, and housing. Here's the thing. We know what ends homelessness. Homelessness ends with a home, it ends with support, it ends with community. And at the end of the day, we have something that all the billionaires in the world don't have: the fierce commitment to care for one another, and the knowledge that the most powerful force on earth is the love that moves us towards solidarity, justice, and collective liberation. It's up to all of us to put that into action right now. Thank you.
I know that's right, Lindsay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, let me give you the tea on Joe Lonsdale. The billionaire who's behind these grant pass bills is a Silicon bro just like Elon Musk and JD Vance. And just like Elon and JD, he got his start from working for a right-wing billionaire in California named Peter Thiel. To tell us what things look like in California is Paul Bowden from the Western Regional Advocacy Project, or WRAP. Paul, take it away.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm Paul Bowden. I'm with the Western Regional Advocacy Project, and our organization is in a bunch of cities. We're in 12 cities in the Western US. Many of us in California, but I think when we talk about this bill and when we talk about, hopefully Representative Omar will be doing the Homes for All Act again soon, is to look at, it's incredibly well documented that the advent of contemporary homelessness in the early 80s was the Reagan Revolution and the massive cuts to affordable housing at HUD and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And immediately after those cuts took effect, we started FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, started funding emergency shelters throughout the country. Since that time, since the early 80s, we've had welfare reform, we've had Hope 6, we've had other draconian measures that have exacerbated the numbers of people that are living unhoused in our communities. And in the homeless system, we've done chronic homeless and redefining family and youth homeless. We've done all this shuffling around with carceral shelters and sanctioned encampments and tiny homes, which do nothing for families, and other responses that are seen as temporary, short-term, cheap responses to what is a crisis that was created by wiping out affordable housing for poor people. There's over 500,000 less public housing units today than there was in 1994. So the responses have been asinine, and the local governments and the state governments have done care courts and sit-lie laws and no panhandling and making it a felony to sleep on public property because they don't want to see you. And the responses have been, we don't want to see the fact that there's absolutely brutal, deadly consequences to federal policy and funding priorities that have been passed. The advent of contemporary homelessness. And, you know, at one point, you got nothing to lose but your chains, folks. Like, you need to organize, you need to fight back. And, you know, when 73% of the sweeps, we've done over 250 or close to 300 outreaches to people that are being swept, and the overwhelming majority of them are local police departments. This is the time, place, and manner restrictions that local governments have used to target African Americans. The Basurero Treaty targeting, you know, the last time the federal government deputized the National Guard was the Basurero program, when they were trying to get rid of people from South and Central and Mexico that they used as cheap labor during World War II. So we're seeing the same patterns over and over and over again. And we look at the Medicaid and Social Security and HUD cuts that are coming our way, there's going to be thousands and millions more people living out in our streets. And it's bad, it's damn time that we no longer accept a militarized police response to the fact that our government is pushing neoliberal policies that are killing people and putting them out in our streets. And as a person that's been out there for a very different reason than HUD, you know, mom passed away, dad was an asshole, that happens to people. But the reality of a separate reality between those that are living housed or poor and those that are benefiting from the economic system that we have right now just continues to grow. And it's the root of homelessness in America today is neoliberal, that now we're seeing as neoliberal fascism. And that's what we need to address with whatever campaigns we're organizing around. This is, we don't need your charity. We don't need anybody's charity. We don't need to give charity. We need compassion and beauty and human rights. And we need to be proud of who we are and stand up strong and say, hell no, we're not taking this shit no more. Thank you very much, Reginald.
Thanks so much, Paul. And like you said, we can fight back, and that's why we're here tonight. On June 28th, the one-year anniversary of the Grants Pass decision, the National Homelessness Law Center will release a summary highlighting the growth of and growing opposition to laws that make it a crime to be homeless. One sneak preview: advocates around the country beat back nearly 85% of anti-homeless laws introduced on the state level. To learn about one of these victories, we will hear from one more person tonight, Tony Holtstetter from Hoosier Action, Indiana, where they fought a Cicero bill in the Indiana State House and won. Welcome to.
Thank you, Jesse. Yeah, I worked in my name's Tony Hostower. I'm have the Care Not Cuffs chapter of Hoosier Action. We organize specifically around harm reduction and reentry issues. I worked in the homeless and addiction field for many years, so I could put names and faces with some of these people that were going to be criminalized. So we immediately went into action. Care Not Cuffs had already organized a harm reduction day at the State House back in January. We knew this Cicero bill was coming, so the harm reduction day was actually about decriminalizing fentanyl and xylazine test strips. But we also had 3 or 4 speakers up there speaking up on the anti-homeless bill. We tried to testify on the bill, but there were so many testifying, we didn't get a chance. Cicero, of course, got a chance to testify. We also met with our legislatures up there and got others involved, got the National Coalition for the Homeless involved, got ACLU, got all of our outreach groups involved, our entire organization, Care Not Cuffs, Hoosier Action as a whole, People's Action, everywhere. We were sending 100,000 text messages, emails, phone calls a day to our legislators, and we killed that bill. It tried to come back 2 different times and it came back as a zombie bill at the end, late in the session, but it had lost so much energy that they didn't want to vote on it. They didn't even want to look at it, but we do know it's coming back. So thank God we got some federal legislation going in to try to stop some of these harmful bills. So, but we'll be back up at the State House next year fighting on this bill. Back to you, Jesse.
Thank you, Tony. All of our speakers from across the country. Your courage inspires us, and it's why we are here. Friends, it doesn't have to be like this. Homeless folks, organizers, and people of conscience know that arresting and finding people when they have nowhere else to go is both ineffective and plain wrong. A key step towards housing justice is fighting back against these billionaire-backed laws that make it a crime to be homeless. And y'all, we are fighting back and winning because we have things that billionaires will never have: truth, compassion, and people power. Now to tell us more about what we can do right now to fight and win is Ann Pratt from People's Action. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Jesse. That's right. We can fight back and win. But let's get real. Right now, the odds are against us. Trump and his billionaire buddies have proposed a budget that will cut $1 trillion from Medicaid and other essential services to pay for tax cuts for the rich. That includes housing cuts. They want to cut over $33 million from housing and homeless programs in this country at a time when more Americans than ever live in fear of losing their homes. And remember, like Paul said, it was federal budget cuts like these that first got us into this mess 40 years ago. That ain't right. That's why on May 20th, we brought people from all over the country to Capitol Hill to speak with lawmakers directly about the harm these cuts will cause to their families. So let's hear what Althea Matthews, who leads the Homelessness Union for Vocal New York, had to say at that event.
People all over the states fighting for one thing, and we are united because there's power in numbers. Yes. My name is Althea Matthews. I'm a leader of the Homeless Union of Vocal New York. And it's a pleasure to be part of this event to speak with you today. I've been homeless for 3 years, and I'm blessed to have been housed for the last 2 years. But before I became part of the system, I was fighting for housing because it's just the right thing to do, but never thought I would be part of it. But I am, and I'm fighting for my life as well as the people's lives as well. Right now, this governor, this government, put it this way, okay, they demolishing a lot of our rights, and I'm part of that part that's going to affect my housing when the federal money is not going to be allocated, not just to New York, but all across the state. we are in jeopardy of being homeless. This is my great-grand, and I have custody of him, and I need to make sure that he is housed.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
We need to make sure that we fight these bullies because we are right. Right always win.
That's right.
And we just have to, what it say, vocal voices of community actors, of leaders. If we don't use our voice, we're not going to get nothing. You understand? We're not going to get anything. So I'm asking you, we have to continue fighting. We have over in New York City 155,000 children. And you know who's attached to those children? Adults. Adults. And so we have to continue. What you want to say? House the homeless?
House the homeless.
All right.
That was amazing. You heard it from Althea. What do we need to do? House the homeless. And if we don't use our voices, we won't get nothing. So that's why we need every one of you to raise your voice to say, we need housing now. And we're just getting started. On July 14th, the Transportation HUD Subcommittee will vote on next year's appropriations. This is where these cuts to housing will be made. So we'll be back on get told to the members of Congress on that day and beyond. And when our lawmakers do offer solutions, we need to support them. So tell your representatives to stop the budget cuts, support the Housing Not Handcuffs Act, and the Homes for All bill, which would invest $1 trillion to build 12 million new permanently affordable homes. That's what we need. This is how we address homelessness and affordability in our country with homes, not handcuffs. At People's Action, we call this a homes guarantee. There is no reason why, in the richest country in the history of the world, every one of us shouldn't have affordable and safe homes. This is what we can do. We can afford it if we fund what the people need instead of giving tax cuts to the rich. So now, I'd like to turn things back over to Reginald from Vocal New York to say more about what we can do. Take it away, Reginald.
Thank you, Ann. All right now, folks. Y'all know what we need to do. Raise our voices now to say housing, not handcuffs. Follow the link on your screen to tell your representatives to sponsor the Housing Not Handcuffs Act. Stop the HUD cuts and restore protections for unhoused people the Supreme Court stole from us last year with the Grant Pass decision. Tell your representative to support real solutions to our housing crisis like Homes for All. What solves homelessness? Duh, housing. It's as simple as that, and we will fight to get it. So wherever you are, wherever you live, find a group near you that is organizing people like you to demand solutions to our housing crisis. Many of us will be taking action on the anniversary of the Grants Pass decision, June 28th. So on that same page, you can find out more ways you can join the fight. Let's remember, what we need is a country with safe and healthy homes for all. We can have that, a homes guarantee, when we work together. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Goodbye.